Hello everybody, you're listening to The Art Show on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound. This is the weekly radio show where we chat about the local arts news. We have a different guest on each week. We head over to the Rye Zone for a review from Twangling Jack Ford, and we play local unsigned and or independent music. As always, you can find us on Facebook. If you search for The Art Show on Wickham Sound, you should be able to find us. You can reach out to me here at the studio by dropping me an email on dane.cobain@wickhamsound.org.uk. That's dane.cobain@wickhamsound.org.uk. If you missed the show, you can also catch up on, we are repeated on Wickham Sound on Monday nights. We're on the Wickham Sound Listen Again, iTunes, Spotify, and wherever else you get your podcasts. So this week we're going to be chatting to author Nikki Dudley. And for this week's entry into the Rye Zone, we are going to be doing part one of a short story of mine called Fat. It is from an anthology called Scarlet Sins that you can find in paperback and ebook on Amazon. So Fat by Dane Cobain, part one. Fat. Mike Walker was fat with a capital F, a capital A and a capital T. In fact, he wasn't just fat, he was obese. Morbidly obese, Dr. Kufieta had said. His wife Jane said he looked like a cross between an elephant and a redneck pickup truck with a bad paint job. She'd shown him a photo of the Cycrolutus marcidus, the blobfish, which she'd found online and which she said looked like he used to when he'd been thinner. His 10-year-old daughter, Lucy, said he looked like Shrek, and somehow that hurt him even more. She didn't speak to her father much, despite living under the same roof as him, because his room smelled like death and he never left it. He couldn't, even if he wanted to. He'd grown too large for his record-breaking bulk to sustain his weight or to fit through the doorframe. When she did speak to him, it was to ask him to override her mother if she'd asked for a new bike and Jane had said no. Her mother always let Mike get his way in the end, even when it came to food, which was why he was so fat in the first place. It was so bad that Jane Walker had almost given up hope. The initial onslaught of doctors and dietitians had slowed to a trickle of specialist nutritionists and physiotherapists. Jane had even asked a priest to bless the house, but spirits or no spirits, Mike wasn't losing any weight. He ate what he wanted when he wanted it, and the most exercise he got was when he rolled over in his reinforced bed to put his plate down. And the worst thing of all was that Mike was nice. Sure, he'd never exactly been popular, nor the kind of guy who had a lot of friends, but he did hold on to the friends that he had. He called his mother every day, loved his family, never raised his voice in anger, and had no other vices except for his love of fatty foods. Not that the press, and particularly the tabloid press, had cared. To them, Mike Walker was just a headline. Morbidly obese father cost taxpayers millions. And so he hadn't been particularly excited about meeting Dr. Kufieta. Just another useless old man with a PhD, he'd said to Jane, when she'd first told him about the appointment. It won't do me any good. And then he'd been surprised when Dr. Kufieta had arrived. He was white for a start, and he was almost young enough to be Mike's son. He wore khaki shorts and a white polo shirt, and he drove a Peugeot 306. He wore wax in his hair and smelled faintly of Lynx Africa. In short, Mike Walker had dismissed the man before he even spoke to him. Dr. Kufieta had started with the usual stuff. If you don't change your lifestyle within 6 months, you'll die, he'd said. I can only help you so much. If you want to make a real change, you'll have to help me out here. You're too big to operate on. We can't get you out of the door, and we can't rig an ambulance that could carry you, and we don't have a big enough bed to take you if you make it to the hospital without having a heart attack on the way. Mike had fumed on the inside, but he'd successfully hidden his disappointment behind several £100 of skin and cartilage. Dr. Kufieta had given him a slap on the wrist and a new diet plan, as well as his personal mobile phone number and a promise that he'd make Mike better, whatever it took. Mike was sceptical. He'd heard it all before, and the good doctor's diet routine wasn't new to him. He shared it with Jane and thought nothing more of it. The doctor shook his head and then disappeared for a quick word with Mike's wife before climbing into his 306 and driving away. That night, Mike's dinner was a thick vegetable stew made with carrots, potatoes, onion, cabbage, lentils, and plenty of salt and pepper. The doctor had allowed him 2 slices of wholemeal bread to go with it. The ultimate goal was a diet of green vegetable smoothies, supplemented with fresh fruit and the occasional grain as a treat. Strictly no meat, and no fish for the first 60 days. The stew was meant to ease him in, for fear that the sudden change might kill him. A secret, dark part of Mike Walker, the part that regretted his early marriage and that thought his daughter would be better off without him. Hoped that it would. That was part one of Fat by Dane Cobain. You're listening to The Art Show on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound. I'm your host, Dane Cobain, and this is Betty Accorsi with Like a Tree.
branches reached for the sky, while yours had touched it. We fed on dreams while the sun calmed our fears. stay on course. Keep up the fight and show no remorse. Don't lose hope, hope is your power and your source. Just because I'm strong enough to handle some pain doesn't mean I deserve it in any way. I'll keep fighting and give it all that it takes to never to allow defeat to show on my face. Fight back, I stand fight back. Always stay on the attack. So fight back, I stand fight back. Always stay on the attack. So fight back. You're not completely broken to the core. All this pain inside that you keep in store. You know what is the means and what is the cause. It's time to open your mouth and bear your claws. Just because I'm strong enough to handle some pain doesn't mean I deserve it in any way. I'll keep fighting and give it all that it takes to never to allow defeat to show on my face. Fight back, I stand fight back. Always stay on the attack. So fight back, I stand fight back. Always stay on the attack. So fight back. In life, when something bad happens, you can choose to let it define you. You can choose to let it destroy you. But one thing you must ensure, you must choose to track down the cure. Fight back, I stand fight back. Always stay on the attack. So fight back, I stand fight back. Always stay on the attack. So fight back.
That was Biting Back by Humans Can't Reboot, and before that we had Like a Tree by Betty Accorsi. You're listening to The Art Show on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound. I'm your host, Dane Cobain, and I'm joined now in conversation by author Nikki Dudley. So the first question is my traditional opening question, which is, what was the last book that you read, and what did you think of it?
The last poetry book I read was by Elizabeth M. Castillo, called Not Quite an Ocean, which is out with 9 pens. And yeah, I love Elizabeth's work always. She kind of writes with kind of tenderness and violence at the same time. And you know, she covers quite a lot of serious issues, which is really interesting, like women's rights and motherhood, but also just kind of emotions that we all have in a really relatable way. So yeah, that's what I recently read.
Cool, awesome. And obviously the main thing I want to chat to you about today is your writing, and obviously you're a poet and you're a novelist as well, so plenty to talk about. But how long have you been writing, and where did you get your start?
I mean, I've always loved writing. I'm sure all writers answer with that, but I think though I'd started taking it more seriously, probably my degree was the first time really where I thought, oh, okay, you can actually write stuff properly. It's not just like something that you do, you know, as a hobby, I guess. So I think, you know, I went to Roehampton, so that was a huge a huge thing. It was great. It was the first time I kind of had to show my work to people, get feedback, and the lecturers there, I think, had a big influence on me as well, because they showed me lots of amazing stuff, which I never would have discovered by myself, or it would have taken me a very long time to find those things. Um, so I think doing that and then staying on to do an MA really kind of cemented that you can be a writer. I mean, it might not be your full-time job, and most of the time it isn't, but you are a writer regardless, and you can get your work out there. Obviously, it resulted in me setting up a magazine as well, which has been fantastic. That makes you feel a bit more like a writer as well, I guess, because you're kind of in that world, and you have to keep publishing stuff in a way because you're an editor, and it feels like
Yeah.
you have to keep contributing and being in that community. So I think, yeah, really it was the degree that started it off for me properly to think, oh, I'm a writer and I need to own that term a bit more.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask you about uni as well, because as you say, we both went to Roehampton, and I was going to ask you what you thought of their creative writing program, but I think you just answered that one for me. But I did just with what you were talking about. I was reading about this the other day, specifically with the term aspiring writer. There was some random person, I don't know who it was online, but they were getting very, very annoyed with the term aspiring writer, being like, why do so many people call themselves aspiring writers? You either write or you don't, and blah blah blah. But there is a lot of discourse around this, and I think, with, let's say, with a musician, for example, I think people who are musicians think of themselves as musicians pretty much as soon as they can play a couple of chords on whatever instrument, whereas when you're a writer, I think it seems to take a lot longer for people to, as you say, to own that term and to sort of proudly tell people, yes, I'm a writer, I write, that's what I do.
I think that's definitely true, and I'm not quite sure why that is. It might be the kind of the value that's placed on it, I guess. And it feels like with writing, which I mean, it is the same with music, because I don't really understand why, but I guess it's just given a bit more cachet or whatever, isn't it?
Yeah.
No, I'm a musician. I've written some songs, and there's just a lot more confidence in that. Whereas I think writers feel a bit more like, well, I'm still working on that. It's not quite ready to
Yeah.
show people. I've got that stop inside me that you really just have to get over in the end and send it out and let it go, because you can't hold on to it anymore. Even if you notice a massive typo, sometimes there's no going back. So you just have to be like, okay, it's not perfect. It's fine. But
Yeah.
it takes a long time to get to that point, I think.
Yeah. Well, I saw something, funny enough, it was about paintings, and it was about like, when is a painting finished? I think it was one of those Who Wants to Be a Millionaire memes where, it has the question and the four options. And the gist of the meme was just that a painting is never finished. It's just you stop working on it. But which is probably true of a novel as well, because I'm sure you've had the same with your books. As soon as you finish one round of editing, you could quite happily start again and just go back through it from the beginning, and you'll find new stuff each time. So eventually you just sort of have to push it out there into the world.
I think your use of the term "happily go back and edit" might be a little bit strange. I get to a point where I don't want to see that novel again, and I don't really care anymore. So, I think what struck me when I was at uni actually was on the English modules. We were doing like the Romantic poets. And I remember reading about Wordsworth and how he kept going back and changing his poems constantly into old age. And as a result, they became more conservative, which I thought was quite interesting. And I think I thought, now I look back on it, I think, well, maybe that piece of writing is a reflection on that time when you published it. And maybe you shouldn't go back and keep editing it and editing it and editing it, because it doesn't really reflect when it was produced and why it was produced, I guess. So I think, I always think about that and just think I don't really want to be one of those writers that keeps going back and trying to fix things which maybe at that time totally worked.
Yeah, better to look forwards and to the future.
Yeah, that's kind of, I try to. It's hard sometimes because you do see a typo or something, but then I just think, well, nobody's perfect, so let's just let's move on.
Awesome. So what can you tell us about Street Cake magazine? You know, how did it come about? Who did you work on it with? How long has it been going? All of that good stuff.
Well, I think you know a bit about Street Cake, but obviously your listeners don't. So hopefully they can discover it. So yeah, I mean, I mentioned the Rampton, and it started on the MA, because by that point, I was making work which was a bit less traditional, I guess, a bit more kind of experimental, but now we might call that innovative or visual, whatever you want to call it. Every term is welcome with me. I don't really care, but my someone on my course called Trini also was kind of looking for a place to send stuff, and there wasn't that many places, especially not in the UK at that point, and especially not run by women either. So we were looking around and we sent it to the places we could find, and then we sort of thought, well, we could start one. And it started off as a bit of a joke. And we kind of were joking around like, yeah, it was to start our magazine. Yeah. And then we were at a poetry reading, and we were joking about names as well. And we were saying it has to be something memorable that people are going to remember, like Tender Buttons, for Gertrude Stein, because it's kind of odd. Anyway, we ended up it was actually my partner, who's I'm still with now, who made a suggestion, and then he said like street lights and pancakes, because that's what he could see out the window. And then we said it has to be something weirder like street cake, and then that just kind of stuck. And then it kind of felt right as well, because street cake's a little bit odd, and it does, things don't always quite mesh, and like street and cake is a bit weird. So it totally worked. And so we started jokingly sending each other emails saying, when should we start street cake? And eventually we did. And now it's been going for 14 years, so not bad, nearly 14 years. And we've run a prize for 3 years of that, the Street Cake Writing Prize, but it's been a bit difficult with arts funding recently, so we haven't managed to do it again. But who knows? The future is open. We may well do it again in the future, because it was a great prize as well. But at the moment, we're just publishing issues every other month, and it's fantastic work all the time. So yeah.
Cool. Awesome. And so, talking about your sort of experimental poetry, what can you tell us about the poetry collections that you've got out?
I've got a collection and a pamphlet with Knives, Forks and Spoons, who aren't publishing at the moment, but they've got a really great backlist. I'll always have a soft spot in my heart for them as well, because they took a risk on me when I was a lot younger, and not so wise in the world, but they were just very supportive. So that there's one out of them called Exits Origins. That was a nice one. That was all about kind of starting in a random place with something I'd overheard or something like that, and not finishing the poems, or trying to. When I read some of them now, I think they are kind of finished, but I tried. And the other collection was called Hope or Delete, which when I read it now, is quite a lot about grief, which I didn't quite realize at that point, but it's quite interesting to read it again. And I did have some work published recently with Bear Bua Press, but unfortunately they have now gone out of print, or out of business, I guess. So I had a collection out of them called Fanny Be Mine, which was all about John Keats and Fanny Brawne. I'm trying to find a new home for it, or I might self-publish it. I'm not sure yet. And the other one was one about dementia and my nan, which is hopefully going to be republished with She Press in September, with a different name and a different cover. But that's all of them are kind of, they have some more traditional aspects, but there's always something more visual or experimental in there. Like, I can't help myself, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, I know that feeling. Cool. And you've obviously you've got your crime novel Volta as well. So what attracted you to writing about crime?
I think I think crime is really interesting. I've always been quite interested in psychology, and especially things about memory and the brain, kind of like. So Volta is a lot about whether you can trust your own version of events, I guess. And that's something I like to explore. I really like kind of having sort of morally grey characters as well, and the readers are sort of thinking, should you support them, should you not support them? So yeah, I quite like that really. So it's more the psychological aspects of crime that I enjoy. I don't really like all the gore and stuff, but sometimes obviously there is a bit in there. Yeah. But it's a lot about relationships as well. And I think crime is quite an interesting way to really push relationships to the limit, if you know what I mean. So that's why I ended up writing thrillers, strangely.
You're listening to The Archer on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound. I'm your host, Dane Cobain. I'm here in conversation with Nikki Dudley, and this is Tom Bradley Jr. with Colourblind.
I sat up and looked at the sky, watching the world pass me by. And I dream of my life without you. Thinking if we just had this room for two. Take me back to when we were alive.
Tom Bradley Jr. with Colourblind. You're listening to The Archer on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound. I'm your host, Dane Cobain, and I'm here in conversation now with this week's guest, Nikki Dudley.
Was that what, I think I'm right in saying it won a Virginia Prize for Fiction, is that right?
Yeah, it did, yeah. But the prize was that it was published, I guess, which is a slightly strange prize. But however you get the work out is good, I guess.
Yeah. So how did that come about then? Was that just like a submissions process?
Yeah, so you just send them the novel to read. And I actually entered on the last day, and I wasn't going to enter. And I thought, I'll just give it a go. So that was quite hilarious. Yeah. And how it all unfolded during lockdown was also quite weird, because it kind of got delayed, and then it was finally, I just randomly got an email one day saying, oh, by the way, you're the winner. I was like, what? Yeah. And then I had to edit it a lot. Actually, a lot of work on it, so much work. And it was kind of weird in lockdown, just trying to edit this novel and stay sane. So
Crazy cool. Yeah, awesome. So you do a bunch of other stuff as well. So you run some workshops. So what kind of workshops do you run, and what's the feedback been like from attendees?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't got to run as many lately, but I really love running workshops. I really love meeting writers and kind of giving them some new ideas and stuff. So I usually, my favorite thing obviously is to teach about how to write in a more innovative, experimental way. But I've done lots of different things. Like I did one with Elizabeth M. Castillo on writing about what hurts, but we did that with like different, using like list poems or instructions and stuff to write about grief and loss, which was quite interesting. I've done some silly ones about like parks and recreation and stuff. But yeah, usually it's about kind of, changing your writing styles, trying out new things, taking a piece of work that you don't really like and making it into something that you do like, or at least a little bit of it, which might then lead you on. And generally people have been really positive about the workshops, and really enjoyed them. Most of them come back and say, oh, I made a new poem out of that, or I sent something out and it's going to be published, which is the best feedback you can get, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
So cool. Yeah, it's brilliant.
And you do editing as well. So what kind of editing do you offer?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's kind of few and far between at the moment, but yeah, I've helped people with their poems, if they're trying to put a pamphlet together or a collection, to kind of give them an overview of how it's working, if things should be moved around. Maybe they've got, they should start with a different poem because it's stronger, stuff like that. And yeah, with novels as well. I've edited novels for people as well. And short stories, so everything really, essentially. And yeah, I really love working with writers. It's great, and it's really nice to help people kind of refine their work and make it the best it can be before they send it out into the world. So it makes me happy.
Yeah, cool. It's funny because I do some editing for some of my clients, and poetry is the one thing I just don't touch poetry because a lot of it's so subjective, and I don't want to. I know if I edited someone else's poems, I would. The only way I'd be able to do it would be I'd force my own style onto what they'd written. So I kind of steer clear of poetry because I don't think I could do a good enough job with it. Whereas with fiction and non-fiction, I'm a little more comfortable. But I wonder whether part of that as well is because of your experience with Street Cake. You're not just used to working on your own poems. You've been exposed to so much poetry by so many different people that maybe that gives you a bit more sort of objectivity when you're looking at someone's collection.
Yeah, I think definitely. I think that definitely helps. Yeah, you're just always reading so much stuff. And yeah, I mean, sometimes the most helpful feedback, I think, is, what did you want to say here, and kind of how did you want the reader to feel? This is making me feel this. Is this what you intended it to be? And then when you think about the structure, sometimes, you'd say, well, that poem being next to that poem is really abrupt, or do you want it to be like that? It's kind of, I guess with poetry, it gets a lot more kind of an overview almost, of, but it's even things like line breaks and stuff. Obviously I like to, mess around with line breaks and spacing and stuff like that. But sometimes it's good to say, why did you do that there? What was that for? And to really think about it and kind of think, well, if you just wanted to really be, shock people or, cut them off there, that's great. But if that's not what you intended, just think about, is that the right place for that?
Yeah.
So I think generally the feedback's helpful, hopefully. Haven't had any complaints yet, but we'll see.
Cool. Awesome. So just a couple more questions. So am I right in thinking that, so are you a mum now?
Yeah,
I don't
indeed.
keep up with things. So how do you balance being a mum with being an author?
Good question, Dane. When I get the answer, I'll let you know. No, I mean, yeah, during lockdown, I set up Mum Right, which was in a response to that,
Yeah.
essentially. So on the Friday, it was kind of schools are closed, and on Monday, many mums, a lot of mums, some dads too, I'm sure, became stay-at-home parents,
Hmm.
and I was not happy with that. I love my kids, but I don't want to be a stay-at-home mom. I've got other things I want to do as
Hmm.
well. I want to spend time with them, but I also want to do, be myself. So pretty soon after that lockdown started, I applied to the Arts Council for a bit of funding to start Mum Right, and it was supposed to be with 10 mums, but I ended up with 20. Because when I read the applications, I just felt everyone. I just got them to fill out something simple saying, why do you want to do Mum Right? And, they'd say, well, I never have time to do writing. And,
Hmm.
my writing's always pushed to the side, and I don't get that time. And I'm feeling really stressed, blah, 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 blah. And it was really, really moving reading the applications. And it ended up being such a positive project for them, but also for me, because there was just a lovely community. And what happened was that I made more time for my writing as a result as well. Because I was saying to all these mums, this workshop, you have to come to this workshop. If your partner asks you about it, this is your time. And I've told you you have. And some of them would just come and just like sit quietly sometimes. And I say, do you know what? That's fine. Just have your time to chill out. You
Yeah.
deserve it. Um, and then, I encouraged them to write and I supported them. And some of them were struggling, and I would speak to them and say, look, how can I help you? Stuff like that. And then as you were doing that for other people, you realized, wait a minute, I'm not making enough time for this
Hmm.
either. So I, said to my partner, I need time to write. and and he was luckily very supportive. But I said, I'm with them a lot of the day at the moment. This is just lockdown. It's insane. And I said, okay, so I need some time. When you finish at this time or in the evening or this time, I'm going to do some writing. And it made me a lot happier to get back
Yeah.
to writing. And it just shows how important it is to have that outlet.
Yeah.
And that anyone who's doing something like, especially caring for people, I mean, it can be exhausting. You don't really get much time to even think about yourself. You forget to eat or like, so being able to say to your partner or whoever is helping you, if you're a single mom, maybe you've got a relative or something, and you can say to them, I just really want to sit down and write. Would you give me that? And being able to ask is so important. And then, you feel happier. So you feel happier coming down and hanging out with your kids and your partner and everyone else because you've had your time to do that. So, yeah, I think being assertive and making that time is so important. And
Yeah.
that's what I try and remind myself of quite regularly.
Yeah. And
Sorry, that was a
everybody
really long
wins as well.
answer. Sorry,
No,
say
no, no,
again.
that's awesome. I was saying everybody wins as well, because as you say, when it means you are actually, it's like that classic thing. If you want to take care of someone, you've got to take care of yourself first, because otherwise you're going to burn out, and then you're both
Yeah.
screwed. So
And it doesn't
cool.
just apply to mums and dads, it
Mm,
applies to anyone who's caring for anyone, and also people who, have mental health problems. I've met a lot of writers who've got mental health problems or issues, and that for them, writing is such a great outlet, and they need
yeah,
to have that time to do that. So everyone benefits when you get to do the thing that you love and enjoy. So Anyway.
Cool. Okay, and one last question to end on. So, well, it's 2 in 1 really. So, what's next for you, and where can people follow you to stay up to date and find out more?
That is a question at the moment with Twitter, isn't it?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I should have my my dementia pamphlet coming out in September, which is very exciting. It was announced, but the date's not totally announced yet. So that's very good. I'm really pleased that's been rehomed as well. And I have a pamphlet coming out with Broken Sleep in January. So that's very exciting. I've been trying to get published by them for a long time. So it's a nice moment in my writing career. And I just got back into my novel today, actually. So that's positive. I'm hoping to finish that. I don't know when, but sometime. And yeah, I guess the best place to find me is my website, which is just nikkidudleywriter.com. But I'm also on all social media, of course. But obviously, I don't know where the best place is at the moment. I mean, I used to love Twitter for the community, but it's not so great anymore, is it?
No. Well, it's not even Twitter anymore, is it?
Well, yeah, I'm not going with that new name at the moment, but yeah, I'm trying to use Instagram a bit more. But yeah, you can find me. I'll be around.
Big thank you to Nikki Dudley for joining me. You're listening to The Arch on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound. I'm your host, Dane Cobain, and this is Luna Barge with Tube Song.
Skateboards and flared jeans go tumbling past me. This platform keeps winding along. We're following dots on the map. Can I sit on your lap while this carriage keeps drumming its song? I'm reading the headlines opposite me. Don't think I'll quite fit. I'll stand till I feel like a drop. Just a model of hairstyles and coffee cups covering your face up. Please let me off at the next stop. All of these people on their journey through life, and we don't know where they've been. Some of them are rushing and some take it slow, but we just keep our own speed. Top of the fashion and tourist attraction, flyers simply litter the floor. I'm getting in some sort of muddle as we soar down this tunnel, mind the gap when I'm shoved through the door. Let's let the people pass by. I'll just look in your eyes, wishing all of this would melt away. Just a jumble of perfumes and gumshoes and makeup and thank yous and just getting on with our day. All of these people on their journey through life, and we don't know where they've been. Some of them are rushing and some take it slow, but we just keep our own speed. La 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 la. All of these people on their journey through life, and we don't know where they've been. Some of them it slow, but we just keep our own speed.
Walked in so confidently, ready to win. Got my eyes locked on you the second you walked in. Had rumors about your life, breaking hearts both left and right. But boy, don't you know that karma ain't nice. I'm all in, ain't here to play games, but it will take two of us to make it. So tell me honestly, you won't lie in front of me when you say you love me. Stand by every word. Tell me honestly, think about your one and only. Know you're playing with fire. Don't make a fool of my heart. Don't make a fool of my heart. Don't make a fool of my heart. Don't make a fool. Don't make a fool. Don't make a fool of my heart. Ratting me out on a date to woo my heart. But little did you know I knew the game from the start. Boy, I ain't easy to win. I know this little game you play. Breaking love within the dark over and over again. I'm all in, ain't here to play games, but it will take two of us to make it. So tell me honestly, you won't lie in front of me when you say you love me. Stand by every word. Tell me honestly, think about your one and only. Know you're playing with fire. Don't make a fool of my heart. Don't make a fool of my heart. Don't make a fool of my heart. Don't make a fool. Don't make a fool. Don't make a fool. Tick tock, time is running out. Will you speak the truth or do I call you out? Tick tock, time is running. Time is running. Time is running. Tick tock, time is running out. Will you speak the truth or do I call you out? Tick tock, time is running. Time is running. Time is running out. So tell me honestly, you won't lie in front of me when you say you love me. Stand by every word. Tell me honestly, think about your one and only. Know you're playing with fire. Don't make a fool of my heart. Don't make a fool of my heart. Don't make a fool of my heart. Don't make a fool. Don't make a fool. Don't make a fool of my heart.
That was Fool of My Heart by Lizzie Porsey, and before that we had Tube Song by Luna Barge. You're listening to The Archer on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound. I'm your host Dane Cobain, and it is time for us to head over to the Oak Shed now to catch up with Twangling Jack Ford for this week's album review.
Rage Against the Machine. There was a lot of this kind of stuff around back in the day. There has always been speculation as to how various styles of popular music began, but I always picture the beginnings of this kind of music as that moment when Steven Tyler of Aerosmith broke down the wall between them and Run DMC on the video of Walk This Way. The other thing I always picture is bouncing bass players with three-quarter length trousers and odd facial hair with very long straps. I did not really take much notice of Rage Against the Machine till I was persuaded to buy the download of Killing in the Name Of to keep Simon Cowell off the Christmas #1 slot. Mostly I took notice when I heard Tom Morello playing guitar with Bruce Springsteen on the High Hopes album. Springsteen fans seemed not to be very keen on that album, particularly Tom Morello's contribution. But I loved the way he could be so noisy, but also melodic at the same time. I have watched many Rage Against the Machine videos on YouTube, and my attention is always drawn to Morello. The constant and so tight riffing, the controlled anarchy of his solos, and the way he makes sounds like scratching and samples. I recently watched him doing his distinctive thing with Måneskin. However, Rage Against the Machine is all about the message. Over the same kind of riffs that Led Zeppelin could have written, are words rapped and slogans shouted, with the lyrical power of Public Enemy. The political statements may actually be more pertinent now. At some point it became the thing for an act just to do the thing that they had become known for. In my day there was always variety. Electric bluesy bands would do something folky and acoustic, and riff-based bands would do something ballady or spacey and psychedelic. So though I applaud the sustained level of anger on this album, my interest does start to wane after about the halfway mark. Rage Against the Machine, their first album.
Big thank you to Twangling Jack Ford for this week's album review. Thank you to all of the artists whose music I've shared. Thank you to A.B. Frank for the Flash Fiction, and to Nikki Dudley for being this week's guest. As always, you can find us on Facebook. If you search for The Art Show on Wickham Sound, you should be able to find us. You can reach out to me here at the studio by dropping me an email on dane.cobain@wickhamsound.org.uk. That's dane.cobain@wickhamsound.org.uk. And we are repeated on Wickham Sound on Monday nights. We're on the Wickham Sound Listen Again, iTunes, Spotify, and wherever else you get your podcasts. So, I'm going to love you and leave you for another week. Thanks so much for listening. This is Lewis Branch with Blah. I'll catch you next time.
I'm so over everything. Love songs dancing in the rain. I'm so over feeling tired. I've been running around chasing all your lies, blah, blah. And now I'm bored of hearing you talk, bored of hearing your thoughts, bored of hearing what's on your mind. So can you just shush? Bored of hearing you talk, bored of hearing your thoughts. Because every time you move your lips, all I hear is la 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 la, blah blah blah, la 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 la, blah blah blah. Promises, fake smile. I'm so over feeling tired. I've been running, running, running all night. And now I'm bored of hearing you talk, bored of hearing your thoughts, bored of hearing what's on your mind. So can you just shush? Bored of hearing you talk, bored of hearing your thoughts. Because every time you move your lips, all I hear is la 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 la, blah blah blah, la 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 la, blah blah blah. Be quiet, sit down, stop running your mouth. Be quiet, sit down, because every time you move your lips, all I hear is blah la 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 la, blah la 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 la, blah blah.